and it's preparing for live streaming. Will take a couple seconds. Okay, Saran, you're all set.
Thank you, Hani. Should I start with the sessions?
Yes, you can.
All right. So greetings to one and all. My name is Saran Prakash. As the proud moderator for today's event, I will be walking us all through the proceedings of Chapter 10 of the Chocotalk on Disaster Risk Reduction, DRR, titled Women in Science, Engineering, Technology and Innovation, SETI for Disaster Risk Reduction or DRR. Before we begin with the session, I request all present here to kindly ensure that they are muted so that the speakers do not face any disturbance. We will have a brief round of Q&A after the first two speakers share their bit with us, and another round of Q&A after the following two speakers sharing. Meanwhile, the participants are requested to note down their questions to be asked later, or they may also use the chat box for the same purpose. The speakers will answer them in the dedicated time slot for Q&A. So as we had already shared in our promotion of today's event, we have acknowledged n number of times how the impact of hazards tends to be uneven and graver for women, thus leading to disasters. Women and girls have been recognized as one of the most vulnerable sections in society in the face of disasters. However, leaving that for our individual revisions, if need be, our session today aims to celebrate this mini constellation of women we have today with us as our esteemed speakers. These are the women who are committed to do their bit for the implementation of, let's say, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in their countries and beyond. With that, I introduce our first speaker, who is on her way to becoming an incredible role model for the youth and young professionals. Dr. Ifa Farhana Abu Talib is the Vice Secretary General of UNspire Alliance and the co-leader UNspire Malaysia. She's a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Architecture, Planning and Surveying, University Technology Mara, Malaysia. Her expertise is DRR, disaster resilience in built environment, and construction management. Her interests cover optimizing business continuity, futures literacy, community-based disaster risk reduction or CBDRR, and empowerment of youth and disaster resilience at local and regional levels. She graduated all her academic degrees from University Technology Mara, UITM, Malaysia, and is a certified graduate technologist. Dr. Ifa Farhana is active in academic research. She has been appointed as a member of Scientific Committee of the 16th Association of Pacific Rim Universities APRU Multi-Hazard Symposium with Disaster Risk Reduction Center. Further, she is an active reviewer of the International Journal of Disaster Management, Tsunami and Disaster Mitigation Research Center. Dr. Ifa utilizes her spare time by being a DRR volunteer. In 2017, she was selected as ASEAN Youth Leader representing Malaysia in a voluntary program at regional level. She's also been appointed as junior consultant for the Futures Thinking on Disaster Risk Reduction DRR program organized by UNESCO, UNDP Accelerator Lab, UNDRR, and UNspire Alliance. Before we begin with the program finally, may I request Hanif to kindly play the video, the opening video of the session.
U-Inspire Alliance is a network of youth and young professionals working in science, engineering, technology, and innovation.
U-Inspire Alliance provides the platform for youth and young professionals to connect, engage, and learn from other youth and experts in the region.
We are not only at the international conferences or at the laboratories. U-Inspire is working together with the local community in the field.
Our main objective is to provide a platform for youth and young professionals to participate in problem-solving actions towards disaster risk reduction.
To participate in decision-making, demonstrating their ability for advocacy, communication and consultation, as well as leveraging advanced technology.
We strongly believe that inclusivity is the integral factor of the DRR. Hence, all our work and projects are people-centric and from the communities on the ground.
We are committed to supporting youth leadership. We are happy to work with the U-Inspire Alliance.
U-Inspire Alliance bridging the gap between professionals and young specialists and make it possible to exchange knowledge and experience between Asian countries to make them more resilient.
We work with youth and the young professionals from the academe and the industry sectors to build back better in a post-pandemic world.
U-Inspire has connect us and bring us together to contribute for disaster risk reduction and climate change by utilizing science, engineering, technology, and innovation.
May I please request for the opening video? Thank you. Thank you so much for playing the videos. Since I've already introduced Dr. Ifa to everyone, I request her to take over the floor.
Thank you, Saran, and thank you, the Chocotalk team. So far, you organized this wonderful event, which give me an opportunity to be hand in hand with other great women that will be presenting their experience after this. I would like to share a little bit of what my background and what my experience has been so far. It's not huge, but it's something that I think would be might be inspiring to some others, or maybe I could also learn from others who are here. I am going to share this as a slideshow. So for those who haven't seen me before, I'm an Ifa Farhana. I'm from U-Inspire Malaysia since the beginning. And the photo that you see here is the launching of U-Inspire Malaysia that was in 2019. Few months after that, I've been recognized by the U-Inspire Alliance to be the candidate of a Vice Secretary General, and I was chosen to do so. And along the way, about many months after that, I was selected also as the junior consultant for UNESCO Office Jakarta for a small, not small project. It's a decent project, but it's we call it a capacity building. I will explain a little bit more after that. And then I also just has been appointed as the senior lecturer in the local university not about less than 1 month recently. So for today, I would like to share a little bit about the roles of youth and young professional in DRR and resilience from my perspective, which also the women perspective. So it is all started when I involved with ASEAN Youth Volunteer Program. It is actually a program that organized by few entities. Main entities is the University Kebangsaan Malaysia, we call as UKM, the local university in Malaysia. They had collaboration together with the ministry and us and ASEAN level. So what the program did was they merged all these 50 youth below 30 years old from 10 ASEAN countries. All of us was 50 people. So we stayed in Indonesia in 2017 because that year was the it is Indonesian turn as the host. So we stayed there for 28 days. So 28 days meaning 4 weeks. So the first week we learned week is about the voluntary.
Dr. Ifa?
What is this theory in DRR? Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt. Your voice was breaking. Can you please check if your mic's connection is fine?
I think the internet was a bit.
Okay.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it's much better. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
So yeah, I understand. Well, that's the glitch of when you having things online. But if you can see the photo here, that is the beauty of having things physically, meaning offline. In 28 days, all these youth that you can see on screen, I assume they are all like my brothers and sisters, which I think I think more than 2 or 3 is also in our talk today. And then in that 4 weeks that we've been in Indonesia, the first week was we had a training in class theory. Week 2 and week 3 we engaged with the community, engaged in terms of we go in the community, we stay with them, we eat and sleep with them, we talk and we do all the fun activities with them, and we get to know them. And interesting part is that when we learn to the community, they have a group of women, they're focusing on that, and they have a group like a general group. So from there, I can see that there's a, how would I say, there's a movement or belief that women is actually a special group that need extra care, but we are also once we are instilled with some knowledge, we can empower and enlighten the people around us. And then we end up the program in week 4 is like a wrapping up, and then we pitch some ideas. So at the end of the day, at the end of the program, they grant us about some amount of money in US dollars so we can take back to our countries, and we follow up whatever that we have pitched, the idea we have pitched. So all these 10 countries, they have representative for each country. They go there to their home country and they execute their ideas. So this, if you can see these 2 photos on the left and the right, is actually 2 different scenes that happen during the program. On the left hand side is actually we call as a school awareness program, where all the volunteers go into the assigned school. So what we did with the school kids is we teach them how to react if there is a tremor of earthquake, because at that area, at that particular area was a earthquake prone area. And then we teach them how to what to do in terms of through the song. So everyone was have fun by singing the song together. And then on the right hand side is the in between alleys in the neighborhood, where we identify this is the route where you should go if there's any earthquake happen. So if you can see the wording here, jalur evakuasi, it means that evacuation route. So you just go straight ahead. So these photos is actually the what do I say? The post program. I submitted these 2 into a photography competition. It helps about the perspective of the disaster risk by University of Loughborough. Apparently, these 2 photos was chosen in one of the top winners and it exhibited in the University of Florida, USA in June 2019. And if anyone who is below 30 years old and is in ASEAN region, I would like to recommend to go to this AYVP, ASEAN Youth Volunteer Program, because recently they just launched for the next program. But I would like to, I'm happy to let you know that they have a different team, but nevertheless, this is one of the interesting program that is not only just one of program, it's actually being a good modality for future. So that program AYVP that I've been telling you about is actually the modality to become what they had established You Inspire. The person who behind this great and interesting idea, one of them is our Secretary General is Dr. Rahma here. So she and the brain idea established You Inspire Indonesia, and then it began for how do I say that? The establishment in terms of the youth and young professional, not only in the perspective of the public, but also in the women perspective. So these photos is also, you can see there's a lot
Dr. Rifa? I think there is a network issue at her end. Dr. Ifa,
Yes,
are you back?
sorry about that.
No
Yes,
issues,
yes,
no
yes.
issues. No issues. Please continue.
Out of so many days. Apologies. Okay, let me continue and open up again. Okay. Let me skip a little bit on this. So the AYVP program is actually the modality of the You Inspire Indonesia at first, but then it grew into all of these countries. Now we have 14 countries. We call ourselves a You Inspire Alliance. And then I think this is the familiar image that you've seen in the video earlier on, the journey of You Inspire Alliance starting in March 2018 up until now. So now we are moving and focusing on our big program, which is called a global platform DRR in 2022, which is will be going to help in Bali. And You Inspire Alliance has established our own roadmap and also action plan. So the colors that you see, number 1, 2, 3, and 4 is actually the roadmap, and the action plan is explained below. So the first one is to connect with YYP. Number 2 is to promote the dialogue, build capacity and networking on DRR. Number 3, to promote innovation. Number 4, to promote access to DRR information, data and technology. Number 5, monitor and evaluation. In between all this roadmap and action plan, of course, we get together in the perspective of women, because we would like to see a mixture and a balance. So if you look at the right hand side over here, we have representative of YYP on international level. And of course, women has been represented by Dr. Rama also, and the rest is also male figures. But somehow we are picking up to have that. And then for roadmap number 2 is the promote dialogue, capacity building and networking. This is where I have been given the chance to heavily involved in Futures Literacy Lab. So what is Futures Literacy Lab? It is actually a program that collaborates between UNESCO, UNDRR, UNDP and You Inspire Alliance to leverage on collective intelligence about YYP for DRR and resilience. In short, is this program is actually, how would you like to see yourself in 2045, for example? People often say, how do you see yourself in 5 years from now or 10 years from now? But let me ask you this. how do you see yourself in 2045? What would it be in terms of DRR? What would it be women roles at that time? How would it be a YYP at 2045? So all of this has been discussed in the series of events. We have webinar 1, we have the lab 1, 2, and 3. We had talked about different topics. The first was disaster risk governance, disaster knowledge, and we end with the human behavior and hazards in 2045. So we had I think about more than 100 youth and young professionals will participate in all of this event. And now all this YYP is actually has a different mindset where we cannot unseen things, meaning we are looking things at differently, and we are not only focusing at one angle, we have a spectrum of foresights that we see in terms of DRR. So and then that is on the regional and international level. When we talk about in national level, because I'm from Malaysia, this is the activities that have been done. This is back in 2020, so now we are picking up for this year. And this is the other roadmap for promote innovation. We also promote access to DRR. If you manage to access our website, we have a list of where we could get further information based on our respective countries and who to contact. So that is maybe some of us take that for granted, but some might be important. So that is a very accessible when we are trying to get more data on that, because data is the key. And then publication monitoring and evaluation. We as the YYP, we had the establishment of the toolkit. This is also involved not only from male perspective, also we have few female figures and the status of science and technology in DRR in Asia Pacific. This is the annual report that have been submitted by Inspire Malaysia. And all these 4 flags here is actually we sent our voluntary commitment to Sendai Framework. Sendai Framework is actually one of the global agenda about DRR. And then, yes, and then how to involve youth in terms of DRR at local level. Sometimes some of the countries, they have different, how do I say, different angle, meaning they tend to promote men more rather than women. But I am so fortunate and I am so blessed that I've been in a country where we don't see gender as a thing. We don't see gender as a biased thing. But all these points is actually how the youth to involve in DRR at local level. So apart from that, let me skip a little bit further because of time conscious. Okay, this is what I've been doing research on. Malaysia is not really had disaster in terms of fast action of disaster, but we had a really slow and laid back kind of disaster. It is flood. It often happens at the end of the year. So this is where triggers my research back in 2014. If you see the left, on the left hand side is the houses that has been kind of damaged and submerged with the flood. And the right hand side, you just imagine the flood at that level. That is a petrol kiosk, and the further right is the mosque. So what happened to those who are having a construction site? Yes, a little bit more, Saran. Yes, thank you. And then this is my research on collecting the data. I was given the chance to collect the data and analyze it using SAM-PLS, sequential equation modeling. So if anyone here would like to have a further talk on SAM-PLS, please, we can have a discussion on that. And then this is the framework that I've come with. This is because my first degree was in construction, so this is actually guideline for them to be more resilient if there's any disaster happen. So I think all in all, by giving anything that I had, it actually enables me to grow positively, increase the ability to work collectively with wonderful YYP that are incredibly optimistic and enthusiastic. With that, I give back to Saran. And apologies for the internet downside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ifa. Your sharing, it actually reminds me of a quote I read in a book, which goes something like, some see their own perceptions as ordinary, to others that makes them extraordinary. But most important of all that is, each one of us has the capacity to develop our minds, to cultivate our abilities so that we can help others as well as ourselves. So thank you, Dr. Ifa, for sharing with us bits from your journey as a DRR professional. Now, before we move on to our next speaker, I request everyone to kindly note that there is a link which has been provided in the chat box. It will direct you all to the form to be filled up for the certificate of participation. Kindly use that before 5:30 p.m. Jakarta time, post which the link will be closed. So next up, we have Dr. Sushila Paudel from You Inspire Nepal. Dr. Sushila is a registered nurse of Nepal who recently completed her PhD in disaster nursing from the University of Kochi, Japan, making her the first nurse in Nepal to have achieved a degree in a field as unique and upcoming as disaster nursing. She holds a rich experience of serving the affected communities during the Gorkha earthquake in Nepal as a coordinator of the UNISDR Risk Award Epi-Nurse project. The project focused on nursing care for DRR. She also served as a cardiovascular operating room nurse at the Manmohan Cardiothoracic Vascular and Transplant Center, Institute of Medicine, Nepal. Thereafter, she joined the Disaster Nursing Global Leadership DNGL program in Japan. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she was actively involved in providing awareness and disseminating public health information to Nepalese migrants in Japan through their social media, for which she was also honored with a certificate of appreciation by the Non-Residential Nepali Association, NRNA. Her research interests lie primarily in the areas of public health for disaster risk reduction, migrants' health, and human security. Dr. Sushila, over to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and the good introduction. Okay, let me share my slides. Thank you so much. I'm Sushila Paudel, registered nurse from Nepal, and recently I graduated from University of Kochi. I earned a doctoral degree. Today I'm talking about my research. Actually, I wanted to talk about the Epi-Nurse project, but I thought let me talk about the COVID-19 and the situation in Japan regarding the Nepalese migrants and their health. My language is terrible. I mix Japanese and English sometimes, so please pardon me. Okay, so why am I talking about the migrants? Although everyone was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, however, the impact is not shared equally. We had 5 million deaths so far, and refugees and migrants are more likely to experience higher burden of COVID-19 infection. We do not have the data regarding the migrants, how many migrants were affected or expired from this COVID-19 infection. Let's visualize the global estimates of international migrants. In 2020, there were 281 million migrants, where Europe and Asia hold 87 million migrants and 86 million migrants respectively. So people are moving here and there. And before the COVID-19 pandemic, there were the barriers to migrants. Migrants are considered as the vulnerable groups of the society. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, these barriers, these vulnerabilities were exacerbated, especially the language and racism and xenophobia and their privacy, stigmatization and cultural barriers. This one is interesting because in the routine times, whenever we have fever, we go to the medical centers. But at the COVID-19 times, people were more encouraged to stay in home quarantine, isolations. So it was done because to prevent the transmission, which was applied equally to nationals as well as the migrants. This was done to prevent the community spread. However, to migrants, because of their poor access to healthcare due to language barriers, financial difficulties, and lack of multilingual translation services at the public health centers, they were more vulnerable. So I was more interested in knowing what are they doing inside home, how are they taking care of their health. And because I was in Japan, and in Japan too, there was not the data about the migrants, how many migrants were suffered, because everybody was treated equally. And if we see the foreign population in Japan, China, South Korea, Vietnam, Philippines, Brazil, Nepal, Indonesia, they are the largest foreigners. However, China, Korea, they do have the ethnic descent. There are more Korean-born or Chinese-born Japanese in Japan. But if we see the Nepalese population in Japan, there has been an increasing trend of Nepalese migrants. They make up the largest South Asian community in Japan. And there is no ancestral or ethnic descent, unlike the most Chinese, Korean, and Brazilians. They speak Nepali language as their mother tongue, and they had no COVID-19 hotline services from the government. And there are very few nurses in Japan, including me. I was on a media, TikTok, which is not regarded, which is not popular among the academicians. I use this platform for entertainment, for dancing and singing. But when there was, especially the Delta variant was spreading too quick, so I thought of awareing the Nepalese population in Japan. So I made a new account and I started making health videos. And so far, right now I have 70,000 followers. All of them are Nepalese, and 45,000 Nepalese are from Japan. And this became a motivation for writing a doctoral dissertation. My doctoral dissertation title was cardiovascular and related to climate change, but I had to change topic because of this pandemic. So with these three purposes: to identify the barriers to healthcare access among Nepalese migrants during the COVID-19 crisis in Japan, to explore the facilitating factors that help them to access healthcare in Japan, and to discuss and recommend ways to counter the barriers that help them to access healthcare at routine and crisis times in Japan. So for the methodology, I used exploratory sequential mixed method approach. For the phase 1, I did qualitative study, and phase 2 was quantitative study. I integrated both the results. First qualitative study, 11 focus group discussions were carried out among 89 participants, and the themes were generated. For the quantitative study, an online survey was carried out where 937 respondents were eligible, and I did a multiple linear regression. For the inclusion criteria is 18 or above, living in Japan for at least 6 months, and I excluded all kind of refugees and asylum seekers because they have different kinds of policies. So the first phase of the qualitative study, I identified 6 categories of barriers and 6 facilitators. There is no category on the facilitating factors. However, I do have, I made 6 categories in the barriers aspect. So there are altogether 26 themes. I'm going to explain this later again. So after I made the themes, I carried out an online survey. I developed the survey questionnaire, and I did not measure the health outputs. However, I asked their perception of their healthcare access. Integrated finding. So there was the gender balance, especially there were more females. The interesting one was the language. They could speak a good level of Japanese language and good level of English language. So I thought, I had a prejudice that they had no problems during this COVID-19 pandemic because they could speak the language so well. So if I go through the details one by one, I do not want to explain everything, but some of things are very important. For example, lack of knowledge of health insurance. Japan has a universal health coverage system. However, we do not have the healthcare insurance system in Nepal. Because of that, they have no experience of, they have no knowledge of health insurance, how to use it, or what are the benefits of having health insurance. Although COVID-19 healthcare was free, I did not carried out this study only related to the COVID-19, but overall health during this pandemic. So they are not visiting the hospitals because they do not know the benefits of healthcare insurance. They think it as a tax. So per month their money is deducted, but they think it as some sort of tax. And price transparency issues in healthcare. I think this is not just in Japan, but I would like to say it in the overall healthcare system. For example, if we go to the department store for shopping and we see the price, we decide, okay, I will buy this one because this is affordable or not. But when we talk about the healthcare system, we cannot decide. We do not know how much is going to be the bill at the end. So because of this, even the small amount is the significant amount for the migrants in foreign countries. So they have kind of fear of having the healthcare cost would gonna be so much expensive for them, which they can't afford. So if there is something like the price transparency in healthcare, I call it price shopping, healthcare shopping, like clothes shopping, healthcare shopping. So if we can make that kind of decision, what care is affordable to me, I think that would be a different kind of, I think many migrants would access the healthcare if we have the price transparency in healthcare. The second one was the structural category, and they lack the medical interpreters. We do not have much medical interpreters, and even the medical interpreters are not licensed. So although it was not significant in the survey, however, most of the participants, they agreed in the survey. And for the lack of the hotline services, Nepalese did not have the hotline services as given to the English, Chinese, Korean, Portuguese, and Spanish by the Japan government. Later, Thai and Vietnamese language were added, but there was no Nepali hotline services, although the population was huge. For the cognitive barriers, it is more related to knowledge. COVID-19 is changing. Initially, they had no knowledge of signs and symptoms of COVID-19, but later they had knowledge. So this is a kind of limitation. It needs to be studied in a longitudinal way. Next one is the cultural barriers. So I had a prejudice that they might not have the language problems, but they had language problems which was significant. And the interesting one was insufficiency of low dose of drugs. They told me like medicines in Japan do not work like medicines in Nepal. And as a nurse, I can understand that it is because of the low dose. Japan tries to minimize the side effects, so they start with the low dose every time. But what it made me realize is because of this climate change or environmental factors, people smoking, many kinds of cardiovascular diseases, genetics, race, alcohol, smoking, our body metabolism is different, individual body is different, but in healthcare system, we give the equivalent medicines to everyone. So the medicine might not work for all equally. Care needs to be individualized in a healthcare system. It is complex, but it needs to be individualized. Psychological barriers, they had fear of catching virus, so they did not visit the hospitals, and they do have fear of discrimination. They did have. For the legal barriers, there are many kinds of administrative procedures. During the COVID-19 crisis, it was a kind of disaster. So at this time, there should not have been the problems with documentations, especially in disaster. If we do not have documentation, some alternatives needs to be sought out. But some of the participants, they told me that they could not get vaccination because they had no documents. For the facilitating factors, the COVID-19 medical care was free, which was a huge facilitating factor to the Nepali migrants, and also the health insurance. Interestingly, I found telehealth services that was used by the Nepali migrants. Although few people in the survey, they agreed, However, I would like to talk about the telehealth services in the next page. And the last facilitator was the health information from Nepali nurses or doctors. So I was also one of the information providing person. So they told me that they were benefited. So this is the telehealthcare system. I think this could be a kind of innovation if there is a open telehealth forum, which could be accessed by all kind of person anytime, and it would be free. If it would be free, the healthcare burden to the healthcare burden to the healthcare system would be reduced. So COVID-19 was a global problem, so they could access to any doctors at any time, anywhere in the world. So this was interesting to me. For the demographic factors, only the income and the poor Japanese language ability predicted their healthcare access. Otherwise, the gender or their visa status, education had no any influence to their healthcare access. And there were some of the recommendation given. For example, Nepal embassy should play the greater role, crucial role at times of crisis, because they have to take care of the Nepalese citizens in Japan. And we could mobilize Nepali doctors, nurses, healthcare. Japan has a very complex policy. They cannot utilize the Nepali nurses like us. So we need a Japan license. Of course, we need a Japan license, but at times of mega disasters, we could be the powerful resources, and media is a powerful disaster risk reduction stakeholder. So we could utilize Nepali influencers or Nepali healthcare workers in any country, not just in Japan. And provision of hotline services, mutual help were some of the recommendations. And overall, they told me that they had a very easy access. I think it is kind of biased because they compare it with the Nepali country where our healthcare system was already overwhelmed. So they felt a kind of safety in Japan because Japan is more developed than Nepal. So they told us like the healthcare access was easy, although I found a lot of barriers. So this is the overall findings, which I have already explained. And for the conclusion, I say Nepali migrants perceived easy access, but I think it's biased. In Korea too, I found a similar finding. Korean migrants also mentioned that they had easy access to the healthcare system because they compare it with their original country. And further research is necessary on the inefficacy of low dose of drugs to migrants and utilization of the telehealth services. And this study also suggests an establishment of crisis information hub by the Nepali embassy, flexible policies for the active deployment of the Nepali volunteers. This should be done by Japan, and accessible hotlines in Nepali language and incorporation of the telehealth care services by Japan. That's all is my research. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful presentation, Dr. Sushila. I mean, your enthusiasm and loyalty towards your work, I think it definitely reinforces the thought that there is such a powerful energy in leading a journey which is free from validation and permission from others, and at the same time, it benefits many. And we all acknowledge that DRR is essentially an interdisciplinary domain. And the way you have blended your expertise of nursing with DRR, it marks I think, a phenomenal pioneer in this line. Again, so thank you once again for this wonderful presentation and sharing. And before we move further, let's take a sip of our hot chocolate or coffee or a bite of our chocolate and open the space for a brief round of questions. I request everyone to kindly unmute themselves and address the concerned speaker with your question. But before that, we, I think, already have one question for Dr. Ifa from Dr. Rema, and it seems that she's already answered that in the chat box. Yet, just so that everyone learns of that discussion, may I please request Dr. Rehma to share her question and Dr. Ifa as well to explain her answer, or maybe just read that out.
Sure, I can explain with photo as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ifa, for a wonderful presentation. I think the part of BCP was very fast, and I'm not so much familiar with BCP. So under the framework that you already explained, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about explaining the framework, and also how general this is and how we need to contextualize when it comes to different disaster, different type of disaster, and also on if this can also be applied beyond the what industry. Maybe it's also like how we need to contextualize the framework for other things. I'm also very impressed with Dr. Susila because I have no background of disaster nursing, and I think this is very important and this is very timely. And eventually, you bring us into thinking about the migrants that also encounter, as you mentioned, different situation than us. I think it might be also the similar situation to other migrants, and we need to think more about them. But if you can also tell just briefly, because I know in Japan there are also many migrants, and how would you see for other nationality migrants, for example, from Indonesia or from Malaysia? Is it? I think it will be the similar situation, but maybe there is some contextualization between each nationality, and I think it's also something that we need to think back in our country, because maybe we are more focusing on our own nationality, but eventually we also have migrants living in our country. Thank you for opening our horizon.
Who's going to answer that? Me first or Sushila first?
Thank you first, please.
Okay, all right. The question is quite interesting. Thank you, Dr. Rama, for that. Apparently, the question is going to use my Viva presentation. This is what I had. So the it involves with the SETI framework and SDG initially. So and also the Malaysian global Malaysian plan. And on top of that, you ask what kind of disaster. So this is disaster that involve that can be accommodated according to the BCP. Some might call it BCM, some might call it as BCP. Apart from that, it is actually a part of disaster recovery, focusing on that niche, because one disaster hit, how does the construction company to come back alive, because back in 2014, flood happened, disaster happened, the resources are there, the money is there, but the main point of the people who doesn't want to go to work because their home is submerged with flood. So that is one important thing that contribute to the failure of the project at that time. So with that, I would like to come up with my own framework and how to guide them. And then it is actually empower them with we call as BCM or business continuity. How to establish that is actually by critical literature review. I compare the top 5 of the country, UK, USA, China, Japan, and Germany, and below Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Singapore, and Malaysia. Top is the top 5 across the globe. Below 5 is the top 5 of Southeast Asia company. So I crisscross with all this information. So they have the BCM, they have the standard, they have the good practice that they have also regulation. So all in all, when I conclude that they have 4 main elements, which is understanding good organization system, number 1. Number 2, they have the similarities where they determine the strategy. Number 3 is to develop response, how they will react after that. And number 4, the maintaining plan. So from there, I come up with my own 1, 2, 3, 4, which is actually combined and give a new name, called as disaster and business continuity for construction organization. The first one, again, understanding the culture. So when you're in any organization or in any community, you have to understand what is going on. You cannot just simply, just bulldoze whatever it is and you give your new idea. No, it doesn't work like that. This is actually the similar idea you had if you are in the case of community-based disaster risk reduction or community-based disaster risk management. Number 2 is disaster impact assessment. You identify what is the impact could happen to that organization or into community. For example, for construction site is the reputation, supply chain information. This is actually I rank them now 1, 2, 3 until 9. So apparently in Malaysia, I had the initial thought it could be something like asset facilities or people or finance, but apparently they said that reputation is number 1. So when you hit the reputation is bad reputation to that company, it means that you won't get any future project. So that is very dangerous as the from the perspective of construction organization. So they put as reputation number 1 at the top. So that is the disaster impact assessment. So when you assess your impact, and then we go for number 3 is strategy. How to strategize after that? So it divided into 2. Number 1 to formulate the strategy, and the first one to formulate strategy. Number 2 is to recover strategies. So in this recovery strategy, it's like a sub strategies. You have the plan of recovery plan, BCP plan, supply chain management plan, and security and safety plan, specific incident plan. So all this is tiny. It is based and customized based on your organization or community and whatnot. And the fourth one is how to respond and maintain. Sometimes we have that thing, but we don't maintain it. It will be useless. We know how to respond based on what we had. That is the value, and that is the key. So all in all, that is how I conduct my research for the past few years. So I hope that is answering your question, Dr. Rama. Back to you and Dr. Saran. Sushila.
Thank you, Dr. Effa. Dr. Rema, is there anything that you want to add or ask, Dr. Effa? Okay. All right. So the next question is addressed to Dr. Sushila. So the question says, what you have done is something that makes a huge impact. What encourages you to use TikTok for helping share the knowledge about health during COVID?
Sorry, what inspired me to make a TikTok account?
Yes, I'll just repeat the question for you. What encourages you to use TikTok for helping share the knowledge about health during COVID?
Thank you so much. First of all, what I see is because of the language barriers, Nepalese are not being able to access the healthcare, and we belong to the developing country, and I know the problems of Nepalese people. So I'm actually the TikTok lover. I love TikTok platform. But for the first time, when COVID-19 hit at 2020 January, so people started, like, there was a panic situation. Everybody is worried. We did not know whether the people could recover or not at the initial stage. So for the first time, when I heard about a nurse in China who recovered herself from, she was COVID positive, but after 5 days, she recovered and she was COVID negative. And then I realized, okay, COVID-19 is weak. There's a cure for COVID-19. 30,000 people have already recovered. So I wanted to share that information. I wanted to say to the people, because people were frightened. And when I gave that message, a nurse has recovered and there are 30,000 recovery cases, that video got viral. It was from my entertainment account. And everybody said, like, thank you. This was a good video to us. This is now we have a hope, something like that. Then I started giving more and more information about how to recover, not just about the panic messages. I did not want to talk about signs and symptoms, but I started talking more about positive things. So my video is all about positive things. I never talk about negative things. Then people, when they started following me, and when I found that I'm reaching to the roots of society, because people have mobile, they use these platforms. There have been 2 billion download. TikTok has been downloaded. TikTok app has been downloaded. So we need to move with the generation. Although I know that I should not be. Some of the people, they told me, like, oh, she is doing PhD, but she is there on the platform, TikTok platform. But I have talked about TikTok platform at many places. There are many influencers on TikTok. So if we can give like even this DRR kind of messages to those TikTok influencers, it could reach to millions of people, because everybody is using TikTok account right now. So that was the encouragement. When people were following me, people were asking me questions when I was giving information, that really encouraged me to make more videos and do more research about it. And I knew the problem like personally sometimes, and in the group form as well. So that was one, that is one of the encouragement. For another question was that not just about the Nepalese, but there are other migrants as well. I think barriers were same. Everybody shared the problems. All migrants had language barriers and some financial barriers or privacy issues. But for the facilitators, we have our network. Indonesian network is really very good in Japan, in comparison to the Nepal. And there are Nepali embassies or Indonesian embassies. Every country has their embassies. So we lack a kind of coordination, I think. If Nepali embassy and the influencers in Japan or health volunteers, health workers, if we could collaborate, if we could negotiate with each other, we have solutions. And Japan really needs to have the flexible policies, not just Japan, I'm talking all over the world. We really need to have the flexible policies during the disaster times, because we need to utilize the resources. Japan is not utilizing, I feel that. So we need more kind of coordinations and collaboration and negotiation. Thank you. And Japan doesn't know about my work yet. My college knows, like Sushila is doing this kind of works and Nepalese are getting benefited, but Japan doesn't know. And it's really sad. I really feel sad.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Sushila. That was a very well elaborated answer and very well said. Are there any other questions that the participants may want to ask?
Hi, this is Arisha. I'm from Malaysia, but I'm currently studying in Japan. I just want to know, why didn't you use this platform? Why didn't you collaborate with your local government, or say your mayor of your prefecture or something, and try to make it collaborated with the government? Because I think the local government is actually very open to embracing foreigners. So because let me just give you an example of my experience. I got my booster shot in Japan. I'm currently studying in Nagoya University. So when I came here, they were struggling with the booster doses, because I was one of the first to get my booster, because I got my first and second dose back in Malaysia. And I actually volunteered. I spoke to my deputy mayor and I volunteered to help out with the immigrants and foreigners. So why didn't you collaborate with the government? Because you said you're sad that Japan doesn't know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Not just the Japan government, there were some news reporters, they wanted to write article about, they did not want to write article about, but I was encouraged to talk to the news writers. First of all, I do not have the proper language myself. I cannot speak Japanese language. That was the reason why I didn't go to the government. I needed the help of my university. Everybody was busy during the COVID-19, and I did not have much time to talk about these kinds of things. But when I asked to KIA, it is a kind of Kochi International Association, I was living in Kochi. So all they could say me is to to do volunteer with them. But when I asked them about helping people directly, because the healthcare system was overburdened, and they said license problem and all that kind. So it really frustrated me. Because of the license, I'm trying to help people, but they said this is rule is rule in Japan. It's really difficult to change the rule. So they just thanked me for what I am doing, but it could not proceed to the upper level. But I had a chance to talk with the International Association in Kochi Prefecture, and I didn't care. I was just giving information, writing my thesis. Yeah, license was the problem.
Yeah, truly impressive. Thank you, doctor, for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Risha. Thank you, Dr. Sushila. I think we have to pause here with the questions this round. And thank you once again, the first two speakers. And we move forward with our next two speakers. And with immense pleasure, I introduce our third speaker from U-Inspire Indonesia now. Dr. Alfita Pushpa Handayani is a lecturer at Geodesy and Geomatic Engineering ITV since 2015. Now she also serves as a secretary at PUSAT Study Agraria ITV, Agraria Study Center ITV. After completing her doctoral research at ITV on predicting land prices, Dr. Alfita explored several other studies related to land economics and land development related to the disasters in Lombok and Lembang fault. Some of her researches are on land prices prediction, land consolidation, land institutional models, and land information systems for earthquake risk management using community participation in Lombok and multi-purpose cadastre development based on sustainable land and disaster risk management in Lembang fault. Her current research is focused on multi-purpose cadastre development based on sustainable and disaster risk management, or DRR. Dr. Alfita, over to you.
Thank you very much, Saran. You can hear my voice clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alfita, and I am very happy to be with all of you today to share my experience working in science, engineering, technology, and innovation, support disaster risk reduction and resilience on a land sector in Indonesia. As we all know that disaster impact may include loss of life, injury, disease, and other negative effect on human physical, mental, and social well-being. Together with damage to property, destruction of assets, loss of services, social and economic disruption, and environmental degradation. When a disaster occurs, people can lose their homes, their land, their sources of livelihood. This condition is exacerbated by the inadequate recording of land data. For example, as we can see, dump of damaged land records after the tsunami. So when the disaster happened, land becomes so vulnerable. And after that, there will be a lot of tenure security. There are incomplete out-of-date loss, damage, or fraudulent land records, inadequate legal recognition of forms of tenure other than ownership, land grabbing, inheritance disputes, inappropriate measure to restrict reconstruction in area designated as unsafe, and also breakdown of formal or customary land institution. So all of these conditions can get worse and severe when it comes to women. So in this discussion, I will start from the definition of post-disaster, land, and gender. First, about the definition of post-disaster. The International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, or ESDR, defines post-disaster recovery as decision and action taken after a disaster with a view to restoring or improving the disaster living condition of the stricken community while encouraging and facilitating necessary adjustment to reduce disaster risk. While the Bureau for Crisis Prevention and Recovery, or BCPR, of UNDP states that managing recovery will require building national capacity, restoring coping mechanism, empowering communities, and the root causes and vulnerability which make society disaster prone. I have a few keywords here: decisions and action, restoring while encouraging and facilitating, building national capacity, coping mechanism, empowering communities, and determining root cause. While the definition of land, we have two definitions. First is land as an abstract thing that is manifest as a set of rights to its use with a value that can be traced to the physical object cannot be moved. And in the definition, the physics definition, land is the 3D object. So the surface of the earth, the material beneath, the air above, and all things fixed to the soil. For the gender, the definition according to World Health Organization, gender can be defined as the socially constructed characteristic of women and men, such as norm, role, relationship of and between groups of women and men. Gender roles and social construction of gender are considered as one of the main reasons for the differences in how women and men experience disaster. So, on scene condition, as previously stated, that after a disaster, issue on land assurance, land grabbing, land occupation, and land disputes will have a huge impact on vulnerable groups, such as informal landholders, widows, and orphans, especially if they were. So when disaster displaced people, land records and social data are key to protect property rights and building resilience. When looking for legislation that provides a special protection for women related to disaster in Indonesia, there are only one regulation was found on the protection of women and protection of children from gender-based violence in disaster. But it doesn't contain anything related to the protection of women's rights to land after the disaster. Even the regulation of the National Land Agency in Indonesia failed to pay special attention to the protection of land rights for women. So a few years ago, when a big earthquake hit Lombok, I joined the land consolidation team from Earth Science and Technology Institute Technology Bandung to help the consolidation process in 2 villages in Lombok. During the process, I recorded some experience of women after the disaster, which I will share here based on several typologies that occur in the field. The first one is about the transfer of the title. So in many land systems, women rely disproportionate on inheritance to gain access and rights to land. Many family homes that had been passed down between generations lack the legal ownership of their property, prohibiting them from accessing resources after disaster. In many cases, a succession or transfer of the title is never carried out, which leaves the original owner's name on the title, and that having a title with multiple created tenure insecurity. After disaster, women who return home are at risk from male relatives or neighbors who take advantage of social and government weakness to protect their claims to land. This is particularly the case for women who are widows or who stand to inherit land from deceased relatives. They got the difficulty in providing proof of ownership. Also, they only got an access to secondary rights. The second typology of legal document. So after the disaster occurred, administration for assistance of or help from the government, especially housing, required 2 important legal documents. The first is the land certificate and the legal identity. It includes the personal identity or the marriage certificate. With a very weak land condition in Indonesia, widows and orphans require proof of legal identity. If they are to access independent rights to land, In certain cultural contexts, women may have less experience in dealing with public institutions, but they are forced to do so to establish their identity and eligibility for land assistance program. So the incompleteness of the document makes women who are victims of disaster do not receive assistance and suffer even more. The third typology, sense of woman in the public sphere of decision making. In her manuscript entitled A Field of One's Own, Gender and Land Rights in South Asia, Dina Agarwal, a professor of economics in India, state that women land ownership rights do not guarantee women involvement in the land. So according to Agarwal, property rights alone are not enough, but must be supported by control rights. After a disaster, women, children, disabled face disproportionate risk of losing access to their pre-disaster land. Assessment of damage, loss, and exit are mostly carried out by male-dominated teams, relying on and feedback only from male household. The fourth typology is that women limited understanding of information related. So education is still limited to how to evacuate when a disaster occurs. Education regarding the protection of land ownership has not been conveyed and socialized properly. Typology rooting on history, culture, religion, economy, and politic characteristic of one country. So, however, there are several points that we can do to what to do in Lombok at that time was to try to focus on exploring what was needed to rebuild a decent life perspective, especially for women who live in that village. So there is no standard solution to an issue after natural disaster. So we need analytical framework designed to assist user to ensure the equal rights of men and housing to housing, land, and property restitution after displacement, land use and settlement planning, and undertake legal and administrative reform to give women full and equal access to economic resources, including the right to inheritance and to ownership of land and other property. So what we need to fill the gap is we need to secure access and right to land. We need to land use and settlement planning, acquisition of land for infrastructure and accommodate women need, also land for women advocacy. Of the several attempts that have been made, of course, some have succeeded, still need a long way to succeed. At various meetings, the resettlement plan, women were excluded, so the decision was represented by men. So we need to make their voice count. We need to do some personal approach, advocacy, and socialization to all the women. Important thing here is to make them learn about the woman participatory mapping. So when woman participatory mapping, it's we bring a map from satellite image before the disaster to ask them where's the land they own or lived before. Technique is very effective to make them recognize the parcel that they own and become sensitive to the environment they live in. We are using the tools to help us communicate. The planning come from spatial data mining, satellite imagery analysis, and aerial photogrammetry, so we can make all that information for fit for purpose land administration. So there is still a long way to go. That women have equality in the certainty of land right after a disaster occurs. In the form of laws and regulation must continue to be encouraged. But however, I we will get there as long as we as a woman continue to dare and have our voice. Thank you.
Hats off, Dr. Alfita, for the topic that you have owned up to. I mean, in developing countries especially, concerns related to land ownership and land rights are as complicated as they can get. And they also tend to get somewhat exhaustingly tangled with the socio-political dynamics of the concerned area, as you rightly addressed in your presentation. And understanding its linkage with DRR is something that can help us all deal with risks that get built up at the grassroots level. So thank you once again for a sharing that remains pressing and relevant across all times. We now move to the final speaker of the day, Dr. Miriam Karail Karada, who generally goes by the name Mika, currently serves as the focal person of You Inspire Philippines. She is an assistant professor at the College of Public Affairs and Development in the University of Philippines, Los Banos, UPLB, where she teaches development management and governance courses. She obtained her bachelor's degree in applied mathematics, majoring in operations research in UPLB. She pursued graduate studies in Doshisha, in Kyoto, Japan, where she obtained the degree in Masters of Business Administration and PhD in Global Studies, majoring in Global Societies, and a certificate in Advanced Doctoral Program in Global Resource Management. Dr. Mika, over to you.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So let me start. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. So as I am introduced, so you can call me Mika. So I will be briefly discussing the governance of DRRM and CCA in the Philippines. So this is just an overview. No, this is a part of a bigger study that I did during my PhD. So for the outline of the presentation, I will be discussing why did I choose the Philippines and why disasters, and then discussion on the governance of disaster risk reduction and management and climate change in the country, and some areas of interest. So let me start with a quote by Truman in 1949. We say that more than half of the people in the world are living in conditions approaching misery. So their food is inadequate, they are victims of disease, their economic life is primitive and stagnant. So their poverty is a handicap and a threat both to them and to more prosperous areas. And in this case, we actually see the need for development. So that's one instance that we see that we need development. And also, in the past quarter century, we have seen a great progress in developing countries. However, despite this impressive record, some 800 million individuals continue to be trapped in what have been termed as absolute poverty. So that's actually one of my inspiration why I'm working with disasters as well, because I think there's a great need in terms of development in this aspect. And why Philippines? So the Philippines is an archipelago of 7,107 islands with a land area of around 300,000 square kilometers and approximately 102 million people. This is during the census in 2016. But currently, I think our population is about 112 million. So the country has a tropical marine climate, meaning we have two seasons, which is the dry and the wet seasons. So Philippines is also the second most disaster vulnerable country, according to the study from the United Nations University in 2014. The country also has problems in poverty reduction, as annually it is computed that the average annual loss from the natural disasters is about 16 billion US dollars. So just to give you an overview, what did I do? What is my study during when I was taking my PhD? So basically, this is a quick explanation on what I did. So basically, it has been observed that in recent years, so we have climate change that's becoming an alarming issue, not just in the national, but it's also in the global level. So as a matter of fact, one of the SDGs, as we know, goal number 13 is geared towards climate action. So climate change has been linked to increasing disasters. And in the study of the Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters in the past 4 decades, so the number of weather and climate related disasters have doubled. So in 1976 to 2005, we had around 3,070 natural disasters. And from 1996 to 2015, there has been 6,392. So furthermore, according to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, in 2005 to 2014 globally, so natural disasters affected 1.7 billion people and 700,000 people were killed. So economic impacts accounted to 1.4 trillion US dollars. So these natural hazards disrupt sustainable development, it affects the livelihood, and this also compounds poverty. So due to this situation, the government and various organizations became interested in disaster risk management and resilience building as a solution-oriented academic concept, as well as public policy orientation. So as part of DRM and resilience building, there are actually numerous initiatives and efforts being done. And one recent initiative that's gaining popularity is the ecosystem-based approaches to disaster risk reduction, or ECO DRR. So this is the sustainable management, conservation, and restoration of ecosystems to reduce disaster risk with the aim of achieving sustainable and resilient development. So now, we say that ecosystems used in ECO DRR are often protected areas such as the national parks, the wilderness areas, and nature reserves. So these protected areas can be costly to maintain and conserve. And according to the Convention on Biological Diversity, so globally ecosystem conservation would amount to approximately 155 to 440 billion US dollars annually. This is with the premise that it satisfies the Aichi targets. There is, however, a possible disaster recovery initiative that has similar ecosystem use in ECO DRR. So that would be ecological tourism or ecotourism. So the big difference is that ecotourism is not only focused on conservation of its ecosystem, but it also has the benefit. So it looks into the benefits of the community surrounding the site. This is actually big to discuss and it takes a long time. So I just got some data to present to you. That's part of the study. So what I will be quickly discussing or sharing to you is actually the development of disaster and calamity disaster management and climate change policies in the Philippines. So basically, the development of disaster and calamity management policies in the Philippines was prompted by a typhoon. The typhoon is called Joanne, which hit the country in 1970s. And from that time, the government recognized the high disaster vulnerability of the country. And as you can see here, so this is the figure. So this is part of what I studied and what I reviewed in my dissertation, looking into the different disaster management and climate change policies from 1970s into until now. So I will not be discussing it one by one, but you can look it up later. I think the presentation might be shared. So just ask our organizers. Okay, so you can look into it detail. What are these different policies? No? But just to give you a background, no? What do these policies represent? Okay, so what do they say? So basically, some of the things that you can pick up is that in the Philippines, we have a survival fund, which is 5% of the estimated revenue from the regular sources of the local government for calamities that may occur during the year. And this shall cover relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and other works or services in connection with calamities. We also have a framework for the air quality monitoring greenhouse gases. And then we also have the Department of Environment and Natural Resources as the National Authority for Clean Development Mechanism. Also um, part of the policies in the Philippines is the creation of the 4-point action plan focusing on the prevention and mitigation of disasters, and also the creation of the Presidential Task Force on Climate Change, which is composed of the Secretary of Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the Department of Energy, the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, and local government, with 2 representatives from the private sector and the civil society. Also, we have a Climate Change Commission that is the sole policy-making body of the government, which is tasked to coordinate, monitor, and evaluate the programs and action plans of the government relating to climate change. Okay. Also, the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, strengthening the country's disaster risk reduction and management system. So providing for the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Framework for institutionalizing the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plan. And then we also have climate financing. And then the Philippine Greenhouse Gas Inventory Management and Reporting Systems, which also aims to institutionalize the greenhouse gas inventory management and reporting system in different government agencies. So basically, that's an overview of what are the development in the disaster management and climate change policies in the Philippines. So basically, the Philippine government have developed a combination of 14 rules and regulations and policies regarding the climate change and disaster management since the 1970s. So recent policies in disaster management and climate change has been mainly inspired and adopted from the international strategies or treaties as the Agenda 21, the UNFCCC, and the HFA, and the government's increasing concern in disaster management and climate change. So in terms of coordinating disaster management in the country, the focal point is the NDRRMC. So the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council, where the Department of the National Defense serves as the secretariat and the executive arm. Okay. So in terms of the different phases of the disaster, there are actually different governmental agencies which supports the NDRRMC. So the Department of Science and Technology, for instance, it leads the efforts in mitigation of disasters. The Department of Interior and Local Government leads efforts in disaster preparedness, and the Department of Social Welfare and Development leads in the disaster response, and the National Economic and Development Authority leads in disaster rehabilitation and recovery. So apart from the national agencies, there are also existing regional and local DRRMCs. Okay. One of the big documents that we have in the country is actually the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plan, or the NDRRMP. So this is from 2011 to 2028. So basically, the NDRRMP has 4 priority areas with 4 long-term goals, 14 objectives, 24 outcomes, and then 56 outputs and 93 activities. So the priority area, as you can see, is the prevention and mitigation. And then we have the disaster preparedness, the disaster response, and then rehabilitation and recovery. Okay. So the National DRRM Plan, this serves as the national guide on how sustainable development can be achieved through inclusive growth while building and the adaptive capacities of communities. So increasing the resilience of vulnerable sectors and optimizing disaster mitigation opportunities with the end in view of promoting people welfare and security towards gender responsive and rights-based sustainable development. No? However, when we go back to perspective that we're looking into to women as well, no, since it's Women's Month and we're celebrating it, when I look into the document, women is actually mentioned just 4 times. And how it was mentioned in this document is that it's mainly on the education of both gender, so men and women, to the situation, so the disasters, and attending, so women attending to the attending to the psychological need of the affected population. So basically, women as part of the vulnerable population, and also women is mentioned in gender mainstreaming. So addressing the different needs, roles, and capacities of each sector. So not just women, so other sectors as well. Okay. And also, so when I was looking into other documents or policy references about women, the role of women in disaster risk reduction and management, the Philippines actually, I think, has a long way still. So if you look into the different literature or different researches, you might see that the Philippines remains one of the top country in Asia in terms of closing the gender gap, according to one study according to the Global Gender Gap Report in 2020 of the World Economic Forum. So, however, we still need a lot of we still need to do a lot, no, and we can still do a lot, no. Some of the things that I saw in my research is that here indicated. So the Department of Environment and Natural Resources underscored the need for women's active participation on the policies and programs designed to address challenges emerging from climate change and current and future pandemic. So there's a need for women participation. So not just them as part of the vulnerable sector, but also part of the solution. And then there's also mentioned by some of our local leaders saying that women can be leaders of change and resilience. And it was actually mentioned in one of the speeches of a senator, a women senator here in the country, that she shared that in the immediate aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan, so among the first day responders were actually Filipino women, Filipino doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, and civilian volunteers. And she also cited that the Secretary General of the Philippine Red Cross during that time is a woman and is also the head of the Department of Social Welfare and Development. So countless Filipino women responded with almost total disregard of their own safety. So operating in what was traditionally viewed as the province of men. So we need to capacitate women as well, not only as a primary caregivers in times of disaster and economic distress, but also as part of the overall strategy on disaster risk reduction and management. And also, I saw this in a study that empowering women and girls in developing countries can aid in global warming, curbing temperature to 2 degrees Celsius. So really, women have a lot to offer in this arena, and it's yet to be discovered. So there's a lot of room for our researches to be done, no, and a lot of progress in this arena. So I guess that ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mika, for such a well-structured presentation. And at a time when the debate over if countries should have independent ministries, departments, and commissions which can responsibly deal with disaster risk and disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, this debate is finding its space in discussions at several platforms. You have shared some extremely insightful and thought-provoking facts for us to ponder over. Thank you once again. The virtual floor is now open for a round of questions and answers and discussions. I request the participants to kindly unmute and address the speaker with the questions that you may have. Do we have any questions from anyone? Yes, Dr. Mika.
Thank you, Dr. Kita and Dr. Mika, for your fantastic presentation. I really enjoy, and I can see that the linkage between both of you
is also on the part of governance and how women can actually, how we need to see on the gender perspective, and also women can also take part through that. And for Dr. Vita, so how I understand that maybe in Palu, and in case of Palu and in Lombok, the voice of women is very difficult to reach out into the decision making. Well, in case of of Mika, she explained that eventually one of the key leaders is a woman. So how do you see? I think there is quite a gap in case of Indonesia for the people, for the leading sector that handle Palu and Lombok earthquake. I cannot recall women leadership unless the head of BMKG, for example. But how would you suggest a more practical solution to leverage the voice and the leadership of women? I think for both of case in Indonesia and Philippines, both in governance for CCA and DRR, and also for land consolidation problems, we need to take more care on leveraging the woman voice and woman leadership. How would be your more concrete recommendation so we can have more women on board?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rahma. Can I give an answer directly, Saran? Okay, so I can see that in Lombok, inside the local community, all the women have their own participation in the different sectors, so in the different. If we can see in the local community, after the disaster, the woman is the one that running the business and the economic well, better than man disaster. So they are recovering better than men in the local community. But when we move to the policy, the governmental policy, we will find some maybe cultural patriarchy that makes they cannot go due to the land rights, especially. We can do it's we give a woman advocacy from the very small local aspect. So we go to their home, talking to them, show them our map from the photogrammetry map, the images, talk to them, and then make their voice heard, because they are very difficult community to go further. Their voice, it's because the cultural, I think, because the restriction, governmental also. I can hear that from Dr. Mika in the Philippines. Maybe the woman representation it's better in the governmental. So maybe we need more women in the policy sector, Dr. Rahma.
Okay, maybe in connection with Alfita just mentioned as well. I think partly in my presentation, I mentioned that the Philippines actually remains one of the, if not the top, but maybe one of the top countries in Asia in terms of closing the gender gap. So it means like the inputs of women and men are not too far apart. But the thing is, it's not yet put into policy. So there are areas still that we need to explore, and maybe that can be done in the near future. So that's from my end.
Thank you, Dr. Mika.
Thank you, speakers. Thank you, Dr. Rehma. Are there any further questions? Anyone from the participants? Okay, it seems like we don't have any more questions. In that case, may I just take a moment and remind everyone of a link which has been provided in the chat box, which will direct you to the form to be filled up for a certificate of participation. Kindly use that before 5:30 p.m. Jakarta time, post which the link will be closed. I think so. This is it. We just listen to the women whose voices are heard when it comes to local, national, and international policy and program making and development, with a long room to go. And not just for humanitarian action and resilience building, but also for the larger peace and collective security of several communities. I generally use the term best of all worlds or being best of all worlds. But I think with this session, I stand corrected as I learned from these incredible women that it is not about being best of all worlds after all. In fact, it is about being the best of yourself for the world you choose to be in and exemplify dedication and possibilities, even through all the challenging times and events. And I think on that note, this reminds me of inspiring words from Spar Street, a visual artist known for his work with Nobel Foundation and United Nations. And he says, the agent of change is that part of us that deeply wants to make a difference in this world, to uplift our own lives in a way that inspires others to recognize their greatness and do wonderful things. It is the allowing of heavens to move through us unimpeded so that we can be of service and leave the world in a better place. With that, I hand over the space to Dr. Noorani Rehma Hanifa, Secretary General You Inspire Alliance, who herself has made some important strides, the latest one being the winning of WIN DRR Rising Star Leadership Award 2021. Dr. Rehma, I request you to kindly help us with a few highlights from the session and close it with your valuable remarks.
Thank you very much, Saran, and thank you very much, Dr. Ifa, Dr. Susila, Dr. Mika, Dr. Alvita. Today is an amazing session for me, and I learned many things, and also it opened up my horizon as well. There are many things that I just learned from various perspectives, and I think today we can clearly see that you, us, are among the proofs that women are also able to pursue higher education and also use build the science and also build up the solution for a better DRR and also beyond DRR. We have followed how Dr. Ifa is engaged in disaster and business continuity planning, CBDR arm, and also the DRR future thinking. Dr. Susila Podel on disaster nursing, how the COVID-19 and the migrants science to the policy recommendation. We also heard Dr. Vita on gender and land consolidation and Dr. Mika on the governance of DRR and CCA. I will not conclude their presentation, but I would like to highlight that all of their presentation is actually, we can see how they are able to seek the problems, structurize and understand the root cause, and also finding the solutions based on science. So if we see, we understand there are so many problems out there, and maybe each of us have our own lens. But then when we can see from this lens what are how we can structure the root causes, how we can develop the methodology to find solution, and how from that solution we are building the science, and also we are proposing recommendations. I think it's something that give us a more clear ideas on what is happening and what action needs to be taken. And this is also like opening my eyes. In February, Mami Mizutori has mentioned that it's important for You Inspire Network to build the science policy nexus. But I think today we can see like 4 different backgrounds but it can all be linked. If we can just put all the lines, we can actually build this science policy nexus together. I really appreciate how all of you can have the ability and the courage to start taking the initiatives, have your own innovation, and going all through the hard pathway. I know that none of you do this easily, but it must be some hard pathway that you are going through. And definitely also raised about how we need to leverage the voice of women. So it seems that we also need to leverage our networking and partnership so we can be together on leveraging the voice of women, and also leveraging more supports for women in science, engineering, technology for DRR, and women leadership. I think the women leadership also play a very important role, and also beyond that. But in the other part, we also have our cultural barriers, but also our culture can be our motivation and support, and a pathway on how we can move forward better. And we can see that all the women here has also a more community-based participation, really touching with the problems within the community. And within this, also we can see that still we need support from men and the environment. So I see some men attending today. I hope that all men attending here can support the women as well to leverage the science policy nexus. So last month, I did some small survey, or what is the role of women in DRR. I think all of you here has really shown your role as educator, and with an innovative way, such as Susila using TikTok, and she can reach so many people. But you know, her TikTok is very creative. If I'm going to do the TikTok, maybe no one will listen. But I think that is a creative way, and in a very innovative way, and it's also show the heart of educator. And I think all of our speakers here show their spirit of education, of educator. We have Dr. Vita, Dr. Mika, Dr. Iva as a lecturer in university, which also is a base of educator. And we can also see the role of leader that we also need to be leveraged, innovator and initiatives. I think not only maybe many people are complaining about problems, but you are among the examples that also take the initiatives to innovate and to build up your ideas and go through all the way here. So I think this is what needs to be leveraged on the woman role, and maybe all of us has also this thinking, how can I make this better? So I think all of you has this ideas in the beginning, when you see all your problems with migrants, with land consolidation, with BCP, and also DRR future thinking, and also on governance. All is actually, how can I make this better? And all of you has already showed the skill of leadership that you can go through here. So I hope that this can also bring you a better pathway ahead for another 10, 20, 30 years ahead, to continue your leadership to DRR in Asia and the Pacific. I believe you will be all the next Racing Star Award of all of us. And leadership, this is quote from Mami Mizutori, leadership is about being able to look at what is happening around you and think, yeah, this is her quote. So I think definitely you are doing this. And I really believe that when women are provided with opportunities, pathway, and trust, we can achieve beyond our imagination. We know that we still have many women that are unfortunate. We are among the fortunate women, although maybe like the iceberg, we can see in the top of the ice we are fortunate, but maybe beyond that we go through many difficulties. But I hope that together we can also bring more opportunities and close the gap, like the Philippines doing, like closing the gap of the women. So maybe we can reduce less unfortunate women, and we can finally broke the vulnerable box of women, so that women can play more significant role in serving their own life and saving their environment. So I think that's all from my set. Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for Dr. For Saran, soon to be PhD, our lovely moderator, Dr. Alvita, Dr. Susila Podel, who just arrived in Nepal today. Dr. Iva, Dr. Mika, and I would also like to thank you all the participants and all the organizers that are working very hard to this event. This event is streamed through YouTube, and you can share the YouTube link to share more inspiration to the others. We will have the Chocolate DRR talk every month in the last Saturday. So I think we will have our next Saturday. In April, the last Saturday, on either on NATEC or on systemic and cascading risk. But please come and join us again for our next Chocolate DRR talk, and be inspired with together of all of us, and let's work together for building disaster resilience and creating more resilience to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rehma. I think almost everyone has turned their cameras on. I request the remaining participants also to turn their camera on, just for a quick snapshot. Firdaus, can you please do the needful?
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. I will take the snapshot from
Yes,
our
please.
participants.
Sure, sure.
Okay, we have 2 pages here. Everyone, please open up your camera. Okay, we'll take a snapshot for first page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, wait. Okay, the second page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and your patient and active participation. We look forward to seeing you again. And may I request the host to kindly play the closing video now?
Thank you.
Thank you all. See you next month.
Thank you
See you
all.
next month.
Thank you.
Thank you all participants.
You're so amazing. Susila, take a good rest.
Thank you. See you.
Enjoy your return to Nepal.
Thank you.
You good luck for your study.
Inspire Alliance is a network of youth and young professionals working in science, engineering, technology, and innovation.
Inspire Alliance provides the platform for youth and young professionals to connect, engage, and learn from other youth and experts in the region.
We are not only at the international conferences or at the laboratories. Inspire is working together with the local community in the field.
Our main objective is to provide a platform for youth and young professionals to participate in problem-solving actions towards disaster risk reduction.
To participate in decision making, demonstrating their ability for advocacy, communication and consultation, as well as leveraging advanced technology.
We strongly believe that inclusivity is the integral factor of the DRR. Hence, all our work and projects are people-centric and from the communities on the ground.
We are committed to supporting youth leadership. We are happy to work with the Inspire Alliance.
Inspire Alliance bridges the gap between professionals and young specialists and make it possible to exchange knowledge and experience between Asian countries to make them more resilient.
We work with youth and the young professionals from the academe and the industry sectors to build back better in a post-pandemic world.
Inspire has connect us and bring us together to contribute for disaster risk reduction and climate change by utilizing science, engineering, technology, and innovation.
Thank you, everyone.